Everyone, my name is Ryan Kim, and welcome back to the AFI project. Today, we're going to be talking about, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies ever made. It's one of my all-time favorites, 2001: A Space Odyssey. This was co-written and directed by Stanley Kubrick, and it was released in 1968. Trying to cover 2001: A Space Odyssey is truly difficult, because this is a movie that could be taken in so many different directions in terms of interpretation of themes and filmmaking that you could make 100 different essays on it and they could all be correct. The only way that I feel that I can cover this movie and its grand scale is to cover it from beginning to end in order. That means there are going to be spoilers, but the simple answer is go watch this movie, because it is one of the finest ever made. If I had to give a high compliment for the movie, it's that it is a legit space opera. It is like opera. It has so many emotions, there's almost little to no dialogue in a lot of scenes, and everything is carried through music and visuals, and it is done incredibly well. Stanley Kubrick has made a lot of great movies like The Shining and A Clockwork Orange, but I believe 2001 to be his masterpiece. But with that said, let us begin and talk about 2001, starting with the fact that this movie is broken up into essentially 3 acts. So let's start off with Act 1, The Dawn of Man. If you can find a 4K television and watch 2001 in 4K, I do highly recommend that you do, because this movie looks amazing in 4K. Like, just the Dawn of Man scenes alone are worth the price. But the Dawn of Man scenes are incredibly important, because this is where we get to see man at the very beginning, where they're basically apes, and they're not even that evolved. They're just scared of everything, and they're hunted upon constantly. And then one day, a monolith shows up, and the apes show up. They're like, oh, what is this? And they start rubbing their hands all over it, and then they get these crazy ideas running through their head. One of the main apes, I believe his name is Moonwatcher, finds out, he picks up this bone, and he's like, hey, I could use this. And then he starts smashing it, and he begins to use it as a weapon, and the apes start to evolve. To the point where Moonwatcher kills off another ape, and they just beat this ape to death. And then in the final scene of The Dawn of Man, he throws up the bone, and in one of the legit scariest transitions in all of film, the bone twirls and twirls and twirls, and then boom, smash cuts to what has been described as either a satellite or nuclear weapon, or maybe both. I've heard many interpretations, but similar to what I said in my intro, they're all correct. This is very scary because going from a bone to a nuclear weapon is just going from step 1 to step 100 in a second. And this scene is where most people turn the movie off, because we're finally into space, and yet there is almost nothing happening. For me, I've always enjoyed seeing, like, oh, Pan Am, they're not around anymore. But these scenes are important, because you see how, even though humanity has evolved to the point where they can travel in space, they're still learning. They're still learning how to walk, how to eat, and yes, even how to use the bathroom. The more we learn, we still have more to learn to begin with. The space station that we end up seeing is one of my favorite movie sets of all time. It looks so unique, with the white backgrounds and the pink chairs, and seeing all of the ancient brands, at least to us in 2020, like Bell Telephone and Howard Johnson's, on these colossal space stations. It's a clash of old and new that I just love. Any semblance of a story begins when we meet up with an astronaut/scientist named Dr. Heywood Floyd. Fun fact, Heywood Floyd would make a return in this movie's sequel that no one knows exists, called 2010, The Year We Make Contact, which also starred Roy Scheider as Heywood Floyd, yes, Chief Brody from Jaws, as well as Helen Mirren and Bob Balaban. Oh, and it also has HAL 9000, aka Douglas Rain, reprising for his one and only time back as HAL after 2001. More on HAL when we get to that. Go watch 2010 as well, because that's really good as well. Not as good as 2001, but it's still good. Act 1 caps off when Dr. Floyd and a group of astronauts discover another monolith, this time on the moon. And in a conference, it seems to be implied that that monolith has been there for roughly 4 million years, meaning that that monolith has been waiting for us. Now we get into Act 2, which is the Jupiter mission. Act 2 is where we meet up our two astronauts, played by Don Lockwood and Keir Dullea, respectively, and we meet HAL 9000, voiced by Douglas Rain. HAL 9000 is one of the greatest villains in any movie ever. You can compare him to people like Darth Vader and Hannibal Lecter and etc., but HAL 9000 is one of the best, if not the best. He's such a cold and calculating machine. I shouldn't even be calling it a he. It's it. It is just a cold and calculating machine. His voice is just so calm, it's terrifying. I have the utmost confidence in the mission. As I mentioned earlier, HAL is played by Douglas Rain, who is only known for playing HAL 9000. He never got another role after this, and 2010, which is a shame because Douglas Rain is very underrated. But at this point, the movie starts to plant the seeds of, okay, how much are the robots really letting on? Because at this point, HAL kind of makes a mistake. He makes a miscalculation, seemingly. And the astronauts are like, okay, did he make a miscalculation? We're not entirely sure, because it's not like they can just go out of their spaceship and go up to the front and check. It's like they gotta plan this stuff out because it's space. One mistake and you're gone. So they basically make a very rash decision and they decide, okay, HAL's got to go. HAL picks up on and the astronauts are screwed. One of the scariest death scenes in movie history for me is when HAL kills Frank. Watching it back for this review, I was reminded of how horrifying this whole thing is. It's very chilling, because HAL has control of everything, and when Frank is outside trying to fix up this part, he's in this pod. He leaves the pod to go to the ship to fix it. Meanwhile, HAL slowly turns the pod, extends out the little retractable arms that are on the side, and in some master filmmaking by Kubrick, he does 4 quick snap zoom-ins on HAL's big red eye, do, 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 do. And the next thing we see, Frank is whizzing off into space with his cord cut, trying to get it back in because that's his oxygen, as he is flying off seemingly to his death. Dave, who is the other astronaut, rushes into another pod to try and get Frank. Meanwhile, HAL is in the ship, killing off the rest of the astronauts. There are 3 other astronauts who are under stasis. Well, they're dead. And while Dave gets Frank's body, he realizes that he's dead and so lets him go. Then he returns and then tries to get back into the ship. Open the pod bay doors, HAL. HAL, do you read me? Yes, Dave, I read you. Open the pod bay doors, please, HAL. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. It's just this verbal back and forth between Dave and this robot. The robot gets such an attitude, despite the fact that he sounds like this. You can tell there is attitude sliced in there. My favorite line of this whole conversation is when HAL says, "This conversation can serve no purpose." Wow, that's cold. Colder than space. But then Dave's like, alright, I'm getting back in this ship no matter what. So he turns the pod around, turns on the explosive bolts, opens up the emergency door on the main ship, the Discovery, blasts in, and then rushes back in and lets the air back in. And you can see it, but it's like a second, but he does smile yes, I'm back in. But then it's back to serious mode. What happens next is simultaneously the funniest and kind of terrifying moment I've ever seen. When Dave is just in tunnel vision, he's like, "Alright, Hal, your ass is grass." And Hal is just there like, "Dave, just what do you think you're doing, Dave? Dave, maybe you should take a stress pill and think things over. I have the utmost confidence in the mission, Dave." But Dave is just, he's done. He's not hearing it. Dave then enters essentially Hal's brain. And when he starts turning off Hal's brain, it's just hysterical to me because he then starts losing his voice and he goes from sounding like this to sounding a lot like this, like his brain is going. And it's terrifying because his brain is going and he's like, "My mind is going. I can feel it. My mind is going." It's a testament to Kubrick to show that despite the fact that Hal can be very deadly, he's also, he does have feelings, it is implied, and you do feel sorry for a robot. You feel sorry for a robot. The last part really does get me in the funny scale, though, because Hal reverts back to his initial programming, and he's like, "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am a HAL 9000 computer, assembled at the HAL lab," and so on and so forth. And then he sings Daisy. "I was taught how to sing a song. Would you like to hear it?" And Dave's like, "Yes, Hal. Sing it for me, Hal. Go ahead." And then Hal is like, "The song is called Daisy. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer too. I'm just crazy, all for the love of you." It's really funny, guys. I'm sorry, but it's just hysterical. This robot, this proud robot, sounding just with this super deep voice, singing this nursery rhyme. Like, how can you not laugh your ass off at that? But then the cherry on top of this segment is when Dr. Haywood Floyd shows up again, and he's like, "Gentlemen, now that you have reached the planet Jupiter, here is your mission. We have received contact from an intelligence not of our own. We believe they have contacted us as far back as 4 million years ago. But it's up to you to find out." And so Dave is like, "Well, I made it this far, I might as well keep going." The final 20 minutes of this movie is really tricky because there are tons of interpretations that you could get for this, but I'm just going to talk about it and then explain it later. Basically, Dave gets in one of the last pods, finds the monolith, and follows it beyond the infinite. That's the title of the third act. And this whole thing has been mocked and parodied nearly to death, where it's just these pretty colors coming at you, and then it's spliced in with Dave making a face like, that's another thing I do laugh at, I won't lie. And then, after like 5 minutes of bright colors and faces, we then smash cut to this white room. It looks like a hotel room in Las Vegas. We first see Dave just basically freaking out in his pod, like, and then smash cut to him still in his suit, but he's like, "Where the hell am I?" And then smash cut to him eating dinner, and he is aged like 80 years, it looks like. And then smash cut again to him on his deathbed. Then we see the monolith, and then he reaches out his finger, just like this. And then, the next thing you know, he becomes the Star Child. That's basically been on all the promotional material after the fact. And that's where the movie ends. What does it all mean? Your guess is as good as mine. 2001 may be one of the most discussed movies of all time. For my money, it's all about the search for God. That's what Stanley Kubrick said, and he never said anything about his movies. I can't remember where the interview was, but I remember watching one review where the reviewer mentioned that Stanley Kubrick said, yes, it is about the search for God. But despite me saying the whole thing about how Hal's dying voice is hysterical and Dave's faces in The Infinite are hysterical, and they are, 2001, again, is one of the finest movies ever made. It's one of those movies that you can watch over and over and over again and see something different every single time. The cinematography is incredible, ditto the music. The acting is really good from Keir Dullea and Don Lockwood. I believe 2001 is sci-fi at its absolute finest. But that is all for me, guys. If you made it this far, good on you. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really grateful for it. Stay tuned for the next time on the AFI project. We'll be taking a look at the 1950s classic from Billy Wilder called Sunset Boulevard. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts on 2001 down below. That'll be an interesting comment section to read. And if you like this video and you want to see more like it, hit the subscribe button and click the bell to allow notifications. That way when a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.